We have a pretty ambitious agenda today, so we'll actually kind of get started, almost right on time. I'm going to start with some brief introductory remarks, but I'll keep it pretty short. I want to really allow Kevin to tell his story. But just in terms of a little bit of background, well, first of all, I do want to say to Kevin, on the behalf of myself, the university, and all the students here, all the alumni here, thank you so much for offering some of your time to offer this really kind of unique experience to students. You've been wonderful help for me over the years in developing my course. I'm very appreciative of that. And I think this is going to be fun. I'm looking forward to learning here as well. Folks have seen a little bit of the bio on Kevin and on Asurion in the emails and message announcements that I've sent in the past. But just to kind of rehash some of the basics, as several of you probably know, Kevin is a Canadian, native of Prince Edward Island. He's also a McGillian. He was an engineering grad, I believe, mid or late 80s. Correct, yeah? After completing his time at McGill, he worked in financial services for a couple of years before deciding to go back to school and doing his MBA at the Stanford GSB. Again, I think that would be in the early 90s. Mm-hmm. And during his time there, he was also a case writer at the GSB, working with a professor called Irving Grusbeck. And after having done his time as a case writer, that's really when Kevin really started his journey into a really unique form of entrepreneurship, and one that I believe may have been partially guided by maybe mentorship from Irving, right?
Absolutely, yes.
And what a wonderful journey that was. What Kevin ended up starting is really the most successful entrepreneurial adventure of its type, I think, in the history of the world. That involved a lot of pretty cool things. It involved playing a role in creating and really growing a new market. And it's really that journey that eventually became Asurion, the largest company in a large market out there. So I won't give any more details than that, because I really will want Kevin to have the opportunity to talk about all the interesting and amazing things there. But I think just now, before we start talking about his journey, we're going to do this little managerial conversations thing. And I want to let Kevin tell you guys a little bit about that. Thank you so much, Kevin.
Thank you, Jiro. Thank you for the kind comments. Yes, I graduated in McGill in 1988, Stanford 1992. As a quick aside, I grew up in Charlottetown. My address was 88 McGill Avenue, if you can believe that. My parents still live at 88 McGill Avenue. So I really appreciate the opportunity to be here. Hopefully this is somewhat interesting, somewhat fun. So the first part of today's class, we're going to just run through a vignette, which is really a subset of a class. So this case that you had a chance to look at was Zero Industries. I've taught it for first year MBAs. I think it's still taught for first year MBAs, but the course overall, and there are probably about 20 cases in the course, is about difficult conversations. We call it there's two different courses: conversations of management, managerial conversations. But it's really about having difficult conversations. And when you become a manager, a leader, and some of you may have been in that position, you will quickly realize, like, these are the tough times. It's not the strategic questions, it's not the operational questions, it's the, hey, I've got to terminate somebody. I got to give somebody a difficult performance review. I've got two really strong members of my team, and I'm only going to promote one of them. So how do I tell the other one and keep him or her excited and energized? And it's fun because I've been doing this for 15 years, and students will go off, they'll have direct reports right away, and they'll call back and they'll say, hey, I've got this tough conversation, can I role play it with you? And that's, that's super gratifying. And we do it. I mean, honestly, at Asurion, we role play all the time. We've integrated that into our culture. And you'll see why when we get through it, because when you role play, you will immediately pick up when you make a mistake. And you're like, okay, did that wrong. Let me try it again. So being able to role play in a safe environment where you can make mistakes is it's actually super efficient. I mean, you want to prepare, you want to think about what somebody else may say, but to hear the words coming out of your mouth, to see the response, there's really, there's no substitute for that. Myself and my other co-teachers, we do look at this class and these difficult conversations as part of leadership. One key element, I believe, of leadership is building trust-based relationships. And you do build those through conversation. And it's these difficult conversations that are particularly meaningful, that give you an opportunity to build that trust, or frankly, to erode it. And some of the themes that flow through all of these conversations, they include be direct, be open, be honest, be authentic. Giving direct, open feedback, even if it's difficult, can still be kind. So some of the things that we talk about, that we ask students to think about as they enter these conversations, is to know your objectives. Figure out what does winning look like? And by winning doesn't mean that the other person's losing. It means, what are you trying to get out of this conversation? If you keep that at the forefront of your mind, it'll help direct where you go, what you say when somebody responds a certain way. There will often be multiple objectives in a conversation. You have to prioritize those. Let me give an example. You've got to deal with you're on a board, you got to deal with another board member. That board member's messed up. He's made a mistake, but you also need his support in making a change. Let's say you want to change out the CEO. So in that conversation, is your focus on figuring out if he made a mistake and getting him to acknowledge it, or is it about getting his support to replace the CEO? Because depending which one you prioritize first will direct how you handle that conversation. Prepare. It's a lot easier to spend an hour, even 15 minutes preparing for a conversation than to clean up the mess after the fact. One of my work colleagues, a gentleman named Brett Kamali, I've worked with him for 15 years. He's got in the back of his mind a 10-to-1 ratio. So when he goes in, for example, to meet with a client, and it might be an hour conversation, he'll spend at least 10 hours, probably even 20, preparing for that. And he will know everything, try to put himself in her shoes. He'll anticipate every question imaginable. And he's been wildly successful. I mean, because he knows what they're thinking before they even say it. He preempts them in certain times. And if you're able to prepare, and you can't prepare for everything, but if you're able to prepare, it certainly increases your chances of achieving those objectives. Like, difficult conversations often relate to feedback. I mean, generally people don't like giving it, they don't like getting it. It's a to-do, it's something of a checklist item, and it is the exact opposite of how it really should be treated. I mean, from a recipient perspective, feedback's a gift. I mean, if you don't get feedback, how do you know how well you're doing, both on the positive and on the developmental opportunities side. And I would argue that we as managers, I mean, that's our job. Our job is to give people feedback, to let them improve, give them the opportunity to reach their full potential. And if we don't do that, we're just not doing our job. And then I guess the final thing I'd say is, the quote's been attributed to many people, but yeah, I think mostly to Maya Angelou. It's not what you say. You'll never remember what somebody said, but you'll never forget how they made you feel. And that, I actually really believe that. It's important what you say, but even in the role play we do today, try to watch, my tone of voice, my body language, my facial expressions. And it's a little bit difficult over Zoom, but I'll tell you, when that person leaves, when that person goes home after being terminated, he or she won't really remember what words you used, unless they were truly outrageous. But they'll remember, did he care? I mean, did he listen? How do you make me feel? Some hopefully helpful thoughts are, these three subpoints come from Irv Grousbeck, who Jiro mentioned, who was my mentor. And he actually created all these courses at Stanford. He's still there, he's 87, 88, and still wins the Best Teacher Award. He's fantastic. But the first is brevity over verbosity. So particularly when we're nervous or anxious, we tend to talk a lot. Resist the temptation. Make the point. Once you make your point, it's okay to pause. After you've made the point, typically everything after that tends to detract from it. I recall one of our class guests saying in the aftermath of the conversation, the more he spoke, the grayer it got, or the less I understood. So just try to be brief. I remember Irv he was on my board. He's been on my board for 25 years, and a couple years into the after the acquisition, we do these quarterly board meetings, and Irv took me aside after and he said, hey Kevin, I'd suggest you talk less. I mean, modeling what he was preaching, that was about the extent of what he told me. Now, I mean, he said, there's no need for me to be exhaustive, be concise, assume that the person you're talking to is intelligent, and if they want to ask follow-on questions, they will. But anyway, brevity over verbosity. The second part is plain talk over platitudes. I mean, use simple words. Don't try to, I find, particularly business school students, they use buzzwords and just MBA speak and consultant speak, and it's the worst. I never know what people are saying. I mean, it's people trying too hard, and frankly, they tend to be so general as to obscure the meaning of what they're saying. I just encourage people to be simple, just channel your inner Hemingway. Single syllable words. As part of that, I'd avoid what my partner and I call high velocity words, just anything that'll raise the temperature in the room. It's generally, in general, we speak in generalities. There's going to be, one of the great things about our classes, we'll take a certain issue and we'll take different angles of it, because there's a best practice to all of these, if you will, but there's going to be nuances. But generally, I'd avoid trying to raise the temperature. If somebody comes at you screaming, yelling, questioning your judgment, it rarely serves you well to match that tone. You might want to try to lower your tone, be calm. And then finally, as I mentioned at the outset of this final section, is tone over content. It's really about it's about the words, but it's about your facial expressions, your body language, how you make them feel. So those are my introductory comments. This is it's a fun class. I love teaching it, and we're going to do a little bit of that here today. Jiro, do you want me to dive right in?
That would be great. Maybe our goal can be within like 4 minutes, we can be in the breakout rooms so that we can, yeah, that would be perfect.
Thank you for keeping me on track. All right. Let's see. I will endeavor to do that. Typically, like we're going to do a termination, okay? And these are among the toughest. But they're also among the most straightforward, difficult conversations. But so prior to, I'm gonna ask for some volunteers here in a second, but just I want to ask a little bit about what you might do in advance and what your objectives may be. But just to remind you, you've got Jeremy Smith, who is a talented VP of manufacturing. He hits his numbers, but he's a bit of a a tyrant, a bit of an Attila the Hun. He's got no soft side at all, no EQ, and he alienates people, and you can see that in the case. I think it says there's 90% attrition in his department. Well, Lazier understands that he needs to, he wants somebody who's talented who can hit these numbers from a financial perspective, but it's just not going to do to have an Attila the Hun working in the organization. So he has appropriately, I think, starts to have corrective conversations with Lazier, or sorry, with Smith. He's had a few, and then 1 month ago, he told Jeremy that, look, you've got 1 month to clean up your act, or I'm going to have to let you go. So a month passes, nothing happens, nothing material happens, and so he's decided to let him go. So your job here is to let him go, is to terminate him. I'd ask for volunteers, what, as you think about prior to having that conversation, what are some of the things you want to think about or contemplate in advance of that conversation? And feel free to raise your hand either visually or on screen, and I'll call on you. Okay, Devin.
I would say, what is the tacit knowledge that he has of the organization that can't really be, that's not written down, and that needs to be communicated to the next person coming in?
Yeah, I mean, I guess I'd even expand that a little. Thank you, Deb. That's great. A little bit to, yeah, like what institutional knowledge does he have that needs to be passed along? How are you gonna get that and transferred? And Devin, how would you get that and transfer it? Would you ask them for it? Would you demand? Yeah, go ahead.
I was thinking, like, I found a kind of, I thought these were kind of like emptying fire threats also, because of the fact that might be some laws that would prevent him from being let go. So I was thinking, like, maybe like putting him in a less like personal position or personable position, and kind of changing that and trying to get, like, pass over the knowledge before doing anything else.
Okay, so you might consider putting him in another role, but keeping him on board for some period of time to get that knowledge passed along. I guess I'd say, and we could, by the way, I'm glad you brought that up. We could have a long conversation about that and a lot of back and forth, but let me touch on that briefly, Devin. I'd say once you've determined that you want, that this person needs to be out of the organization, I'd say the best practice to me would be to move that person out of the organization. I think, like, to put him or her into a different role as a stopgap, I say it's not fair to the organization and it's not fair to him. I mean, unless you tell him, hey, Jeremy, look, you're out of the organization. I want to give you 6 months and then move on. A version of that, though, Devin, that might work and is often used is you terminate him, but then once you terminate, you ask him to stick around for 30, 60, 90 days. but it's a known transition period.
Mm-hmm.
So that's a way to handle that.
Interesting.
Anything else from anyone else on what you might do prior to?
Maybe one more. Elizabeth, do you want to chime in?
Yeah, hi. I would just think about how I'm going to communicate to ensure that there's no way that I can be misunderstood, or that, sorry, what is his name again in the—
Jeremy.
So that Jeremy doesn't walk out of the conversation with some different understanding of what's going on than I have. And I'd also want to make sure that I'm communicating a reason that he can understand. So for example, it seems like Jeremy's someone who's like results are very important to him, and he thinks that results are very important to you as well. So you need to be able to communicate that like the results are not the issue in order to make it an effective conversation.
That's great. And thank you for bringing that up, Elizabeth. I appreciate your comment. Okay. On that last point, let me take the other side of that. So the objective of this conversation is to terminate him. What you don't want to do, you don't want to get in a debate with him. You don't want to, and I'm foreshadowing here a little bit, but Jeremy will push back and he will say, hey, I hit my numbers, and as opposed to getting into a back and forth of, no, that's not why, it's because of your relationships. What I would argue is to not have that conversation at this point in time. It's really less about giving them a rationale, because you've made a decision and you want to move forward. I think that that conversation, if he really wants to know and wants to develop, what I try to do is tell him, you know what, I'll get together in a week or two and I'll talk to you about what can help you moving forward. Because once you tell somebody they're terminated, they're not listening to anything else. I mean, that's a blow. I mean, they're emotionally, I mean, even if there's almost no way that they can't be hurt emotionally. And just if you imagine yourself in those shoes, it's like, they're probably not going to remember anything you say anyway. So I'd argue, and by the way, doesn't mean that you wouldn't do this in some instances or times, because I have done exactly what you said, Elizabeth, but generally I would try to err away from giving the person rationale or getting into a performance review in this. So trying to stay on time, Jiro, I will. So the objective here is to terminate Jeremy, let him go. And I think ideally, if there were, that's number one, and then number two might be to get, get him to acknowledge verbally that these are the terms of the separation that you're trying to that you want him to abide by. So and just filling in the very first question, like some of the other things that you may think about beforehand, is you might think about the severance agreement. Often people have a severance package, you want to have that ready, you want to share that with them. Is there any transition time? We talked a little bit about that with Devin. And then have a, how that, who's going to take over? I mean, you want to think through that. What are you going to say to your employees? Because that's going to happen right away. So those are things to think about. Okay, now you get to have fun. I think you're going to go into breakout sessions, and one of you is going to play Lazier, the other Jeremy. I just encourage you as Lazier, you want an orderly transition and a release. A release meaning, let me explain that for a second. What you'll want to do with Jeremy is get him to sign a document, not then and there, but after he's had a chance to review it. That basically says, yeah, these are the terms of my release. I'm going to get paid this much severance. I'll stick around for this much. I might get healthcare benefits for this. Healthcare may not be as appropriate, but I'll get certain benefits for a period of time. And I agree to not sue you. And I agree to not disparage you. Those are sort of common terms, and that's both ways. And then as Jeremy, you know, you may or may not be surprised by it, but look, you're hitting your numbers, you're doing what you think he wants, and you feel like you should be getting a pat on the back by delivering your numbers in under, you know, you've got under not duress, but under difficult circumstances when you've got these two factories, and it's you know, so you think you're overperforming.
We hope everyone had a good time in the breakout rooms, trying out this difficult conversations thing. But I think all of us are really interested in seeing how Kevin approaches this stuff. So we're going to jump straight into this. But for about the next 10 minutes, Kevin is going to simulate this conversation, as I said, with one of your classmates, Kanishk Shah, who also happens to be the TA in my ACF course and a student in my VC course. So without further ado, we might as well get started with that convo.
Great. Thank you, Jiro. Jeremy, how are you doing today?
You know what, Bob? I'm actually doing really well. You remember Johnny? You met him at your father's Christmas party last year. My son. Yeah. He got into this school, and I just got the email this morning, and he was really struggling at his previous school. So I think this new school is going to really help him out. Tuition's a bit rough, but it's good. It's really going to help him out, and both my partner and I are super excited about it.
Well, that's great, Jeremy. I'm glad to hear that, but I've got some tough news. Here, let's pause here for 1 second. I asked Kanishk to start that way because I wanted folks to see a little bit what not to do. So I asked Jeremy right at the outset, how are you doing? Well, I don't know how he's doing now, but I know how he's going to be doing in about a minute. And it's now made my job more difficult. So I now have to take him from a place where he's happy up here, and I got to bridge a bigger gap. So I guess when you're going to have one of these difficult conversations, I'd recommend not starting the conversation in a traditional way. So now I'm going to try that again. By the way, the great thing about role play is you can stop anytime and just, redo it when you make a mistake, because those are the best learning experiences. So Jeremy, we talked, thank you for coming. We talked about your performance issues over the last few meetings, and I'm sorry to say that I haven't seen the improvement that I'd hoped to see. So unfortunately, I'm going to need to let you go. I'm sorry that it's come to this, but the purpose of the meeting today is to discuss the terms of your separation.
I don't know what to say. Who's going to replace me? Like, I don't understand why you gave me a target. I came in, I crushed it. The numbers are good. You wanted a numbers-based approach to the business. I did that. And you can't expect me to just change in a month. Like, I don't know. Can we talk about this a bit more? Like, I can change more.
Yeah, Jeremy, I appreciate the attempts you've made, but what I've seen over the last.
Kevin is logging on to different Wi-Fi at his home, so it might take a little bit of time. But we will continue with this, and we will make the adjustments that we need to make. So as to make the best use of our slight amount of downtime right now. If anyone has any questions that you think I might be able to answer, don't get your hopes up too high, but maybe. Or if you guys have any comments that you want to give in terms of, subject to the things that are out of our control, which is technology. To be honest, I'm surprised the tech works this well. So like, I'm surprised this doesn't happen more often. But any feedback or any questions, go ahead, ask away. I'm not sure if you have your hand up right now, but you can go ahead if you want, because I see that first.
Yeah, Jiro, thank you. I just have a question to avoid like the debate from Jeremy. When you're Lazir, should you have set like KPIs in like the initial meetings? Like I need like this amount of approval from your staff. That way, when he says like, like I have improved, you're like, well, you actually didn't hit the targets we
Yeah,
discussed.
but so the answer is maybe, and that might be an interesting question, actually, an open discussion to ask Kevin. My reaction is, look, you can't it can't be on your shoulders as a manager to have to contract everything to basically dictate the full behavior of your employee. At the end of the day, there is, if you put someone in a managerial role with responsibility over others, a big criterion there is the judgment of the manager, meaning that you shouldn't have to write a KPI for everything in terms of how to interact with the people you have oversight on, right? So that, if anything, it's unclear to me. So I actually would be interested. It's a good question. I would be interested in actually even knowing. So we'll put that open discussion time after the conversation. I'll make sure that you get to ask this question first, because I am interested in seeing what Kevin says. My gut reaction in terms of whether it was me, but let's keep in the back of our minds that I have no managerial experience, but nonetheless, my intuitive reaction is that it's not your job to give him perfect clarity on judgment, so that you shouldn't have to tell him you have responsibility over 12 people, kind of think about whether they're happy or not, because they work, they're the ones doing a lot of the work. To me, it just it's almost like babying the person, right? It's oh, you don't need to do that. I'll literally give you all that guidance. Then why are you a manager, right? So, but ask the question, because he might say something a little bit different.
Yeah, that makes sense. Thanks, Jiro.
No problem. Yes, Bruce. Oh, and I think Kevin, actually, you know what? I think Kevin may be back on. Kevin, are you there?
So, Jeremy, okay, so we're going back to the termination. Apologies for this. Jeremy, we talked about your performance issues over the last few months, and I'm sorry to say I haven't seen the improvement or the progress that we need. The purpose of this meeting is to discuss the terms of your separation from the company. I'm sorry it's come to this, but I'm going to have to ask you to leave.
I don't really know how to react in this situation. I did what you told me to. I've been with this company for 10 years and I'm the first one in, last one out. I come in on weekends, I meet my goals. When you came in after your father, I met my goals, and now you're just gonna let me go?
Yeah. Yeah, Jeremy, I'm really sorry it's come to this. It's unfortunate, but yes, I've made the decision. And look, we are going to take care of you. I've got a severance package of 10 months. It's very generous. I'm going to help you with some outplacement services, because I want to make sure that you get on to another role in an effective and very efficient way. And look, I am going to ask, and I would like for you to stick around for 60 days for a transition period. You can help out. You can, during that time, you can look for a new job as well as continue to work here. And so,
who's going to replace me? Who do you want me to train to take my job?
I'm not going to ask you to train anyone, Jeremy. I just, what I don't have is I don't have an immediate replacement. I'll probably fill that role for a period of time. I'll start a search, but it would be helpful to me if you stuck around for 60 days, and I'll pay you double for that period of time. I'd certainly understand if you didn't want to do that and you wanted to walk out today, but I'd make it. I plan to be very generous with you, but know that independent of that, I'm still going to give you 7-month or 10-month severance and have outplacement services made available.
But I just don't. So you don't have someone to replace me, but yet you still want to fire me. So I'm better than no one is what I'm hearing right now.
No, I I know this is difficult, and in a couple weeks, if you'd like to sit down and we can talk about this, and we can talk about what, you know, what development opportunities I see for you, what I think you could have done better, what I could have done better. I'm happy to have that discussion with you to the extent that you feel that that would be helpful to you. But for right now, the message I want to share is
what if I agree to stay with you to help the transition period, but if I can show you I can change. I've been here for 10 years. Like this place is my life. If I show you I can change, can I stay? I will make an active effort to implement what you say, stay back and help you. You don't even have to pay me double. Just give me the shot. Don't let this be your final decision. Just give me the shot.
I'm sorry, Jeremy. I've made the decision. It's time to move on. I
Okay.
apologize. I think it's best that here's a document that I've created. It lays the terms of the severance out. I'd like you to take a look at it, maybe have a lawyer look at it, and then maybe reconvene on Monday and finalize this. Okay.
Okay. Like I guess there's nothing really I can do or say here. Like I just wonder, like, you know, I just don't really know where I'm gonna go. I'm 48 years old. Like it's hard to do a new skill set. Like I know the younger team members can change, but when you're a bit older, it's hard. But like, I guess there's not much I can say, and we can meet on Monday after I have like my cousin who's a lawyer look at it. Like I just don't know how I'm gonna tell the family and my kids. But yeah, I guess we'll talk on Monday.
Why don't we end it there? Kanishk, you were tough. That was, I mean, you almost hit me when you said, hey, I'll work for 60 days and just terminate me at the end if I do a bad job. I'm like, it's not a bad call. I almost thought about it. I'm like, no, I can't do that. I can't do
Kevin, if you ever want to hire him for some simulations, down with that.
And by the way, Kanishk, your implicit threat at the end was not lost on me. Yeah, I'll have my cousin lawyer look at it, and I'll be back with an age discrimination lawsuit. Yeah, that was not lost on me. Like I think here's the risk in getting sucked into that, because I couldn't have done better myself, Kanishk. Like if you waver. If I wavered, then I'm being wildly unfair to him. I mean, I've made the decision. I mean, he's not the right fit. We know that. I mean, 90% attrition. He alienates everyone. He's not going to change in 60 days. And to give him the impression or the hope, that's just cruel. I mean, it's freaking cruel to do that to him. And I mean, by the way, it would have made me feel good right then and there to say, yeah, okay, I'll do it. But don't think of yourself, because that's selfish. Think of him. I know it's a little bit backwards, but it's true. Like he wasn't going to make it. So that I commend you. That was an awesome job.
Yeah, really well done, Kanishk. I think, maybe now what we'll do for the next 10 minutes or so is we can open this up to audience discussion. You guys can say stuff about what you guys experienced in your private simulation in the breakout rooms, or you can ask questions to Kevin about things related to what everyone has just seen. I think Morgan has a question, so maybe Morgan, you can ask the question first.
Thanks, Jiro. Thanks, Kevin, for coming in today. I actually asked this when you just dropped off for a moment, but I'd like to get your thoughts as well. I was wondering if during those earlier discussions, we should have, as Lazier, set KPIs, like something like we need like this amount of approval within your department. That way there is no argument around like, I've improved over the past month, I need more time to change and things like that.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely right. When so the termination discussion should not be a surprise, and think of it as a culmination of increasingly more challenging conversations. Like prior to this, the 1 month earlier, was the, I call the penultimate conversation, which is, and that conversation is, hey, if you don't improve, then I'm going to have to let you go. But the clearer you can be in giving this person, Jeremy, feedback and what he has to accomplish, the more specific it is, I think the more likely it is that person will improve. Now I think, I think there's an inherent challenge in just, having some sort of survey where everybody likes you. I mean, this is one where it's just going to be, so, hey, stop being an ass. How do you do that? I mean, this requires a whole personality change. But certainly metrics, KPIs are the more you can make it objective, the better. But in these instances, I think it would be probably having maybe conversations with your team, and your conversation and your team. Maybe the result, it might be something like a 360. Hey, I'm going to do a 360 at a certain time, and I want to see that the team has seen you improve. Could be something like that.
That makes a lot of sense. And I don't want to take up too much time, but just to follow up quickly, within the meeting, you wouldn't bring up like, the people on your team have kind of said they don't like you, like anything like that?
No, I wouldn't. I mean, just like I was saying earlier, I don't think it serves you or him to get into an argument or a discussion around his performance. In particular, I wouldn't kick him when he's down. I mean, there's a little bit of, hey, you just fired him, and now I'm going to tell you everybody hates you. I know there's a natural reaction to justify what you're saying, give this person a reason when he's asking for a reason. I think there's something about telling the person what is wrong. I mean, what you're doing by that is telling them why they're so bad and why they're getting fired, and that just feels a little bit, one, it doesn't feel good, but two, I'm not sure they're really listening. And that's why I tried to when Kanishk asked me about it, I tried to push it off for a couple of weeks and say, hey, look, I'll talk to you in a week or two. And if you really want to talk about it then, if you think that would be helpful to you.
Mike Brentnell, you can ask your question next.
Thanks so much, Kevin, for doing this. A question I had is something kind of you spoke about the better part of 3 years ago in a GSB talk, where you said it's one of the hardest things to do as a company is to reduce the time between the decision when you're going to terminate someone and actually when you do it. And you said that it was really difficult for Asurion to do that sometimes. I was wondering if you had any more insight on things you've learned in the last 3 years about how you can actually reduce that time period.
Yeah, I mean, look, everybody's going to, I think that's, sorry, I'm just going to move there we go. I think that's always going to be the case. I think we strive to be better, but we're never going to be perfect. And we're always going to want to see the best in somebody. We're going to want to see that they're, we're going to want to hope that they're getting better. I think the best advice I have is use some mechanism to hold your own feet to the fire in making these decisions. And it might be a board member, it might be an executive coach, it might be a peer, where you that person holds you accountable for ensuring that you've got the right people on your team. And if you've got somebody who's an advisor to you or a board member who will ask the tough questions, and you have to report back to that person on a regular basis every 30 days. I think that to me is feels like it's the best way to move toward action sooner. Because I know personally, it's like, oh, you know, I have this other stuff to do. I'm just going to push it off. But if you're talking to, in my case, Irv, and I know I'm going to talk to Irv about it, and then you're going to take action because I don't want to tell Irv a second time that this person's not performing and it's not improved. So there's a little bit of holding your own feet to the fire there. That's the best advice I've got for trying to shorten the distance between decision and to making that decision.
Perfect. Actually, my partner Mary wants to ask a question next, so I'll let her ask away.
Thanks, darling. Hi, Kevin.
Hi, Mary.
Hi. I wanted to ask a question that perhaps may be of use or interest to the students. What if you are aware that the individual that you are letting go has some form of perhaps mental health issues or is somewhat fragile in some way? To what extent are you responsible for not, for instance, triggering those? How should you protect yourself and also them in that situation?
Yeah, thank you. These are tough issues. I don't know if I've got, I think it's very situational, but I do think generally, look, if somebody has mental health issues, like you want to be supportive of them. You want to be supportive of them through that process. And I guess I would, like, I'd err on the side of compassion whenever possible. And hopefully you're working with that person along the way to get him or her help. And before it gets to the point where I gotta ask you to leave, and that you're working with him or her, and you've got, like I said at the outset, a lot of these conversations about building trust-based relationships. If you've got that kind of relationship with someone, these conversations are easier to have. Yeah, I do think you've got an if not a legal obligation, a moral obligation to work with that person, to help that person through. And yeah, I would take extra time to and make accommodations. Yeah, I think that ultimately you need to do what's best for the entire organization. And if it's, you know, with some time, if it's not working out, then you'll need to have that conversation and do it in as compassionate way as possible. You know, it might, you might vary it a little bit. You might consider bringing, you know, a friend along who knows this person well, or a head of HR who knows this person well. So you consider various. I mean, I will tell you, one of my colleague or business colleague I know, he actually terminated his CFO by letter. He wrote her a letter, which sounds insane, but in that instance it worked. So I'm not suggesting that's best practice, but I do think you can vary based on the circumstances a little bit. And yeah, so anyway, that's how I'd answer it.
I mean, it's interesting. Maybe I can chime in with a little remark, and maybe you can tell me whether you agree with this statement, Kevin, which is that, you know, we've talked a lot about this conversation almost in a vacuum with our discussion here, but what I hear as almost the main thing that I take away from what you just said, Kevin, is these things shouldn't be in a vacuum. You're forming a relationship with people over years, and if you do that the right way, if you do it in a way that is ethical and moral, it dramatically eases a lot of these concerns. Especially things that are potentially extremely serious, like what Mary brought up. Would you say that's accurate, or?
That's 100% accurate. I think so at Asurion, we've taken a lot of what I've learned or what we teach in this course, and we branded it everyday leadership. And in a nutshell, the best advice I give my managers is just have a conversation. I mean, literally just talk to them, your team, talk to them about their goals, you know, talk to them about their development opportunities, tell them what they're doing well, talk to them about their kids, you know, talk to them about their aspirations, like what do they want to do? I mean, just talk. And that, I mean, frankly, everything flows from that. I mean, people want to see that you care. I mean, at the end of the day, yeah, as a business, you need to hit goals and you need to get there, but it's a lot more fun, and I think you get a lot further when you like doing it with, you like the people you're doing it with. And I do think I do think it is really as simple as that. It's just having a conversation, caring. Now, like I don't want to pretend that no, we don't have to deliver results. We do. I mean, these are for-profit entities that we run, and it drives the system. But you can do that in a kind. That is not antithetical to being kind. Yeah.
Thank you, Kevin. So we'll one more question, Bruce. And for the others who have questions, I'll try to figure out a way, in a way that comes natural next time Kevin and I talk, to maybe even get some of your other questions asked. We'll just figure out how to make it work within your schedule, Kevin, if that's okay. But go ahead, Bruce.
Yeah, first of all, thanks for holding this event. I just have a question to Kevin, whether fire Smith is a wise decision or right decision or not, given the fact the company is performance target driven and Smith almost meet all the targets. And another fact, there's a new employee, I guess it's VP Finance. He didn't meet the target for 3 consecutive quarters, and he still has a job. But Smith is like 10 years loyal employee, meet all the targets, and now you want to fire him. And another fact is we don't really have a replacement for him. So I'm just wondering if it's a right decision or not. Maybe like I'm in my breakout room, I'm Bob. So I try to hire an assistant to Smith instead of fire Smith. So let Smith like train the assistant, and then we can replace him after. But I guess to my first question, do you think it's a correct or right decision to fire Smith?
No, it's a good question. It's the right decision. So I guess I'd start with, you know, these cases are meant to be, give you a certain amount of information. You don't have all the information. And comparing one to the other, if we're in the company, we had all the information, you might be able to make that assessment. In this case, it's really designed to serve a purpose, and the purpose here is, no, I want students to practice terminating, Jeremy, and that's why we're clear. We give you information, but we're clear. You've made the decision. So for pedagogical purposes, no, we want to fire. Now, if you're asking a more nuanced question, hey, within the context of the organization, why didn't you fire this guy versus Jeremy? Honestly, we just don't have enough information for that. So for purposes of this class, yeah, no, the job was to fire him and not really to make a decision whether it was worth firing.
Okay, thank you.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Bruce. Thank you, everyone. Wonderful questions. And also a big thank you to Kanishk for being such a difficult person to hire.
Awesome. Great job. Great job.
You know, so I think rest of the talk will mainly allow Kevin to talk a little bit about, as I said earlier, his journey from entrepreneur to leader of a extremely large and successful organization. You know, to be honest, there's so many different topics that we could talk about that we can never do it justice in the 17 minutes that are left in this event. We could talk about running $1 billion company. We can talk about building $1 billion company. We cannot talk about it all. So I'm going to just try to iron focus on a couple of things that that I think are particularly interesting, although it just is the tip of the iceberg. And so maybe we can actually, more so than talking about running a $1 billion company, we can talk a little bit about building it, because you have to build it before you run it, and these folks haven't built it yet. So maybe that's the thing they need to know about first. Tell us a little bit about your story and how Asurion came about.
Thanks, Jiro. So, yeah, it's been 25 years. So it was through a search fund. I'll give you a brief history and talk about some of the things that I guess maybe were helpful or learned along the way. So I raised a search fund with a partner in 1993, and we acquired Road Rescue in 1995. And Road Rescue was a provider of roadside assistance services, much like CAA or AAA. However, its sales channel of distribution was through wireless carriers. So we would sell the service wholesale to a wireless carrier, like a TELUS or a Rogers, and they would in turn offer the point of sale to their customers. And this made a lot of sense back in the mid-90s because mobile phones were car phones. That was the main use. Most of you probably don't know that, but they were bigger and heavier, and they weren't as easy to lug around, or you had to lug them around. And it was $3 a month added to your cell phone bill, and so the connection between the phone and the car made a lot of sense. What we found in the first 5 years of running it from 95 to 2000 was that we were actually in the wireless business. So yes, we provided insurance. There was an underlying insurance component to roadside assistance because we took money in and we took the risk on how often somebody broke down. It's not an actual insurance product, however. And we were in the roadside assistance business in the sense that that's what we did. But truly, we're in the wireless business because that was the engine that drove the company. Now, it took us, Jim and I, about 5 years to figure that out, because we started diversifying. Hey, let's go get some insurance. Let's go look at other channels of distribution, insurance companies, automotive manufacturers, credit card companies. And all of those were terrible moves because for those channels of distribution, roadside assistance was a cost center, and it was, we could barely make any money on that. Whereas with wireless, the wireless companies actually made money on it. And the more they sold, the more they made, the more we made. And it was, and the biggest, and just to dimension, it's still private, but the biggest driver by a wide margin of that success was the wireless industry. So, the advice one is, get lucky. I mean, we basically get into a business that was attached to one of the biggest, waves, if you will, or technology waves of the century. It was the wireless revolution. And just to tell you how, it really was luck. In business school, I remember doing it was not a market study, but I was being interviewed about wireless phones, and this was like in 1990. I'm like, oh, wireless phone, to carry it around, that's stupid. Why would I want somebody to be able to call me? I can't imagine that being a good business. So obviously I had no idea, but we were lucky to get into the business at the right period of time, and that drove everything. But once we were in it, and you wouldn't see this from the outside, but it's sort of the magic of being in a business is you get to see opportunities that people from the outside wouldn't see. And while it doesn't make any sense at all from the outside in, how did you go from roadside assistance to cell phone insurance? It actually makes perfect sense when you're in it. Because when you're in it, and you went into a wireless store at that point in time, there were two brochures on the desk. There was roadside assistance and there was cell phone insurance. And that's what the carrier sold. And basically, from a from our sales perspective, we sold it to the same marketing director at the wireless carrier. They sold it to the same consumer. They charged exactly the same amount, $3 a month. Operationally, it was identical because whenever somebody had a problem, either they were stuck on the side of the road or they broke their phone, they would call a call center and we would either send a truck or send a phone. It was actually almost identical. And so we recognized that that was a better business than roadside assistance. It was more connected to the wireless industry, which has a lot of legs. And so we ended up acquiring a small company in Nashville, also with $8 million of revenue in 2001, and in 1999. And that real roadside assistance eventually went away. It served its purpose of getting us into the wireless industry, and like cash flow went from several $100,000 to ultimately 25 million, which was great, but then attrited away over the years. In 1999, it was about $1 million of cash flow from the cell phone insurance, and that our profit, and that all comes from the cell phone insurance business. We serve over 200 million customers globally. Go ahead, Jiro.
Yeah, sorry. You made a reference to luck, but you guys weren't the only player that attempted to do this stuff, and you guys did it better than everyone else. So while I agree that luck plays a role in this, you guys executed on that luck. You identified the opportunity. What do you think was most important in this environment for you guys to really execute on that, or maybe luck-based observation, but executing on it like an expert?
I love the term execute on luck. So Jim Collins, in one of his books, talks about return on luck, that over time he believes all companies have the same amount of luck, good and bad. It's just how do you handle it when you get there? Yeah, I think in our business, I mean, not to be too flip, but our competitors were not that good. One was good, the other two were not so good, and what we did a couple things really well. We focused on service. So we realized we weren't in the insurance industry, we were in the service industry. So treating the customers well. So that meant, this helped us financially too. It meant controlling the customer experience end to end. So whenever somebody had a problem, so whether it was how to make the claim, whether it's they got to us via the web or through the phone to make that claim. But then it's also, hey, let's manage the operation of getting that handset back to that customer. So let's get in the supply, fulfillment, logistics business to make sure that happens. So we integrated into that part of the supply chain. And then ultimately what we did is, in order to keep the price down, is we got those old phones back that were damaged and we got them refurbished like new so that we could keep the price low. So we wanted to surround the customer experience, make it really a 5-star experience, and that separated ourselves from the competition. So we were able to do that. The other thing, and probably the more important thing we did, was we hired great people. I mean, everybody says they do it or they want to do it, but I'll tell you, if you, and really it doesn't take that many, particularly as an entrepreneur, young entrepreneur, if you hire the people who report to you, you just focus on them and you hire great people, they will do things, and you don't hire them just for that role, but you hire them for their, what they can, their future capability. It's phenomenal. How it feels to be pulled along as having to push people. I mean, our CFO, our first CFO was so, and he was an MBA from a Northeastern school, I forget which one, and he was fine, but he wasn't really motivated, wasn't a driver. And then I hired Gerald Risk, and Gerald, he didn't have a lot of experience. He went to an investment bank after business school, but he was a driver. He was one like, okay, I'm going after it. I have this energy, this, what we call it, Asurion divine discontent, this, never satisfied and wanting to continue to do better, to improve. And no matter how high the goal is that we meet, we're gonna look back, we're gonna assess what could we have done better and go after even bigger goals. And that, like when I look at the failures and the successes along the way, I can almost always point to the people. I mean, we've had a couple of, just recently we had a negotiation with one of our top clients, and we had two of our top clients negotiated over the course of the last year. The first one, we didn't have a leader, and it was the way it went was there was a lot of pushing from me and my partner to get it done. The second one, we had a leader, this woman Cindy, who came back off the bench from being retired, and it was like a godsend. It's like somebody who was pulling us along. So when you've got great people, it makes all the difference in the world.
That's awesome. I'm actually gonna take a bit of a sharp turn here because there's one question that I actually really want to ask, because I think it's maybe relevant for students and anchors on something that you're really, really famous for, which is your ability to prioritize and to know which fires to walk past. And I want to really bring it up because, you know, and you probably remember this from your days at McGill, you know, McGillians, you know, have been overachievers and have been really good at everything, especially in school all their life. And so they have this tendency of wanting to be a perfectionist so that there is no fire that is not worth trying to take on the moment you see it. So maybe you could give them a little bit of your perspective on that, because I think it might tell them something important about the real world.
Sure. So I do think the ability to effectively prioritize is an important capability. I've seen, I've hired a lot of people, and I've seen really smart people flame out because they can't focus their attention on key items. And the like it is, I do believe it's sort of, it's natural to want to do everything, and it's frankly natural if you've got a list of 10 things to do, you will move them all down the path you'll try to move them all down the path at the same time. And that is a recipe for failure. I mean, it's you just can't do a good job of that many things. And you know, the better part that I've seen is like you pick two, maybe three, but two, and you focus the majority of your time and attention on those things, both you personally or you organizationally, and you get those, you complete those, you drive those, and then maybe if you have time for others, you can let them drop. But it's picking the right things. So you do need to know which ones to pick, which ones to focus on. And I think you know, you can use some criteria, whether it's, you know, a major personnel issue, whether it's a client issue, whether it's a cash flow issue. I mean, the you know, and you know, relative sizing, you can figure out, you know, with your screen. But if you focus your attention on a few things, you will you'll probably surprise yourself. We have a thing at Asurion called the Power of 10, and it's a little bit of a combination of focus and prioritization. And the for the big items, for the most important things, and there might be 5 or 6 within a year in Asurion, we'll bring together the experts, maybe half a dozen, and they could be at any level of the organization, and we will prepare. There'll be maybe 2 or 3 sessions that may be a few hours long. There'll be materials prepared beforehand. We'll come together, and with the focus, time, and effort on that issue, and you're not worried about, oh, the meeting you just come out of or the meeting you're going to, and all these other things, and you've got people building on one another, you will be shocked at how that you'll come up with new creative solutions and ideas, just focusing on a handful of things. I do think about my priorities regularly. I think about them, if not daily, every other day. I use a very high-tech method. I'm going to show you right here. It's called yellow Post-its. I have 1 or 2. I usually have one of the more strategic things. If I need more than 1 yellow Post-it, I've got way too many. But that is the more strategic, and this is sort of the just the day-to-day stuff. See, I've got Jiro there. So the like I don't. If you got any more than that, then you're not doing yourself or anybody else, or you're doing a disservice to yourself.
All right, 2 Post-it rule. I'm a little bit ashamed with how much stuff I've got around here right now all of a sudden. We've got a couple of minutes left, so I'll maybe allow 1, at most 2 other questions from the audience. Kyrie, do you have a question?
Sorry, that was the hand from the previous question. I don't know how to unraise it. Sorry.
Okay, sorry about that. Kanishk, maybe. It seems right. We'll let Kanishk ask the last question.
So my question is slightly off topic here, but I think it's something a lot of students on this call consider, and it's about business school. And a question students often ask themselves is business school the right decision for me? And what would you say are some of the right, not necessarily right, but like some of the reasons that students should really consider business school, and some of the reasons that you think are surface level and they're doing a disservice to themselves by actually going to business school, and they'd be better off delaying it or not going at all?
Yeah, there's been a trend over the last several years of the 2-year business degree sort of going away. And you've seen, big schools reduce the size of the class. There's the 1-year degree. And I guess honestly, I don't know if there's a right answer to it. I think it's a personal decision. I think some of the great things you get out of business school include it's a really particularly if you've worked before, and in many business schools you've worked for a few years, it's just a great time to pause and reflect. And it's I think particularly early in your career, you're gaining skills, you're evaluating the landscape, thinking about which direction you may want to go, and then you get to be put into a pod, if you will, with a few hundred people, and get to reflect on not only your experiences but the experiences of others, and see it through their lens. And so then you get to sort of learn from all, not just the disciplines of finance and marketing and economics, but you get to see different industries. You get to see the different types of people you can work with. It can be different countries. So I like the idea of being, particularly at a younger age, being exposed to all that. I do. I mean, look, I think there's you can't deny that the network that you build through that 1 or 2 years is critically important. And I don't mean that just from a career perspective. I mean it from a life perspective. The friends I hang out with, or used to hang out with pre-COVID, the kids that my kids grew up with, the people I work with, the people I invest with, I mean, I'd say 70% of them are business school friends. I mean, it's not uncommon that you'll find a cohort that will last 20 or 30 years. And to me, that's the biggest thing you get out of business school.
That's really helpful. Thank you very much. And thank you for taking the time to speak with us today.
Yes,
Thank
Kevin.
you. I hope you guys enjoyed it. It was a lot of fun. I'm so sorry about the technical difficulties.
Oh, this was absolutely wonderful return on everyone's time. I think now I'm sure everyone in the audience understands why I was so enthusiastic about this event. I feel grateful every time Kevin and I get to spend a bit of time together, because every single time we talk, it's going to be about something interesting. I'm going to learn something, and I always try to make sure that I take a bit of time to reflect on what we've discussed, either over the phone or things like that. Is really wonderful that students here, the university, can call you a member of the family. And I think you give us a lot to be proud of, not just as a successful business person, but as a really great person. So thank you so much for that. I know that you have an extremely busy schedule. So I just wanted to say on the behalf of everyone, and I'm sure everyone echoes the same thoughts and feelings, thank you so much.
Thank you, Jiro. You're too kind. I had a great time, and look forward to doing it again sometime. All right. See you, Jiro.
Wonderful.
Bye, all.
Thank you, guys.
Well, I will tell you, I was impressed with Jiro's COVID hairdo when I saw him yesterday on the first time on video. I think he was equally impressed by this thing that I've got growing on my face.
Absolutely. You know, I can't do that, so I'm not even going to try. I know you had kind of slightly longish hair before, so you had to kind of make things interesting.